Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Hey, every single week, I try to bring local leaders to this show so that we can hear their stories of success and get their advice on how we all can thrive as Austin moves in to the next decade. And today I'm really excited because we have with us Noah Zandan. Now, if you don't know Noah, he is the CEO and co-founder of Quantified.ai. And we're going to talk a little bit about the company, but he's also kind of a unicorn. He's one of those rare breed, second generation Austin tech folks. In fact, his dad, Peter Zandan, I kind of knew him from the community back in the 1990s. And, at that time, Noah would have been in high school. He then went on to Dartmouth College. And I bring that up because many of you know my daughter is graduating from Dartmouth College in about 7 weeks. So I'll get to do another trip to Hanover and see Roger Federer give the graduation address, but I'm a big fan of Dartmouth, so when I saw that on his bio, we were going to just toss that in. He then went to Wall Street. He then went and got his MBA at Kellogg. And then he came back to Austin to start his own thing, because what Noah is really about is measuring things that have never been measured before. He likes to make the qualitative things quantitative, and he kind of wanted to grow something. He watched his dad start companies in the living room on like a dining room table, and he was so passionate about it. He's like, you don't get that way on Wall Street. I want that. So now he is growing this company. So Noah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
No, I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. I gave kind of your basic background, but let's start with like college age Noah. What was your hopes and dreams, and where did you go from there?
You know, I went to Dartmouth. My parents were terrified growing up in Texas that I would never leave. So their biggest fear was that I would be born in Texas, I would stay in Texas, and I wouldn't go anywhere else. And so there was a lot of pressure growing up for me to experience other parts of the country. Both my parents are from New England, and so it was like, get to New England. When I went to Dartmouth, I was on the swim team. So, I was that naive freshman or sophomore that thought, oh, swimming's my future. This is all that matters. Got through sophomore year and started to realize that there's no such thing really as pro swimming, and I certainly wasn't good enough to be a pro swimmer and make any money doing it. So I better pay a little bit more attention to my classes, and started getting a little bit more sleep and being a little bit more academic at that point. From the start, was really influenced by my parents. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a tech entrepreneur and sort of liked learning and liked technology. And that was the young Noah.
Nice. And so then you went to Wall Street. What was your career there like? Who were you working for? What did you do?
So I managed to work at Lehman Brothers, which is no longer around. So learned a few lessons about, when you're at the lowest level of the organization, what an organization is taking crazy risks. Are you aware of that? Like, how much do you know about what your organization is doing when you're really just trying to survive and get a paycheck and have fun with your friends? The most interesting story I can tell you, though, is at Zandan, I'm the end of the alphabet, and the guy that I was sitting next to during trainings, his name was Eduardo Saverin. He's one of the founders of Facebook. So I'm sitting there during training next to him, and I'm trying to build financial models because I came from liberal arts and didn't know anything about accounting, and he's coding Facebook. It's pretty interesting to sit next to him and watch him go through the debate of should he leave our training program to go move to California to build this company that seemed to be working. And it's kind of like my first exposure to like, okay, I'm on this really unique path of like, that's very approved to go into finance and do the Wall Street thing. But there's other paths, and this technology thing may be fairly disruptive. And it just planted a little seed for me that I think impacted me a decade later.
Nice. So let's talk about the company that you have now. I know you've done a few other things, but let's talk about this company because it's really exciting what I was looking up about it. So tell us about Quantified.ai.
Sure. So the company, we use AI to democratize what the best coach would do with you if they could sit with you and give you all the attention you deserve. There's been a bunch of moments in my life, Tom, where like people have unlocked my potential, whether that's as an athlete or as a student or as someone running a business. And those have been really intentional sort of interventions in my life. And they've been personalized and they've been emotional and they've moved me. AI is a fundamental technology shift. I'm sure you've spoken about it to a lot of people on this show, but I'm a big believer that like we are in a fundamental shift. A bunch of people were comparing it to the invention of the electricity or the printing press, right?
Absolutely.
Like this is big.
Yep.
It's going to change the way that we teach people and the way that we coach people and the way that we help people become more successful versions of themselves. And what we're trying to do at Quantified is use artificial intelligence to give people coaching and feedback, the stuff that most of us are never fortunate enough to get in our lives, or maybe a few people are like close enough to us to pull me aside and say, hey, Noah, you were terrible in that pitch you just did with this company. And here's why. And next time, do these 6 things different. That's a specific example that someone gave me. I'm trying to give that to people. And that's what we're trying to do at Quantified. A lot of our focus right now is on customer-facing teams, because if we can help people have better conversations with their customers, we can help the company perform a lot better. It's just a great business use case.
Well, there's a couple things here I want to unpack. First of all, I get all excited when you're talking about that. I mean, everybody knows part of my background is as a motivational speaker for 12 years. That's all I did. And so being able to give people advice and see them get excited and be able to go out and thrive on it. I mean, that was sort of my day to day. And so I get excited when you're talking about that. But I'm also a huge fan of coaches and mentors. And I've got a couple of people in my life who were that for me when I was young and coming up. In fact, I wish when you were 58, mentors would just appear. People tend not to want to show up and say, hey, kid, I can help you. But when I was in my 20s, I had several people who opened up a lot of doors. When I moved to Austin, a gentleman who had been city manager. I moved here in 92. It wasn't popular. I was one of the first Californians, I think, to move here. And I think I left the door ajar. Sorry, everybody. But a family friend lived here. He used to be city manager. He owned part of the Nighthawk Steakhouse. And everybody knew him. Everybody knew him and his wife. Her first husband had been mayor. So everybody knew them. And I had a connection to him. And he took me under his wing and he said, look, it's hard to move to Austin because everyone is from here. Everyone went to Austin High. Everyone went to UT. Of course, that's not true anymore. But, he was really good at opening amazing doors for me. And I ended up going to work at the Chamber of Commerce and doing other things that led me to the career that I had. And then I've given back on the other side. I've got 2 or 3 young guys who, for the last 10 years, they said, would you be my mentor? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but you can always call. And they've never stopped calling for like a decade. So my kids refer to these guys as my fake sons because they're around so much. But they'll tell you their life is better because they had someone who would call them out. Because that's what, I'm not their real dad. I can tell them where they're screwed up. So I got excited when you talked about that. So let's talk a little bit about how does AI do that?
Yeah, so AI is a remarkable technology because, especially this latest generation of AI, right? Old AI, I like to call better math. New AI, like this generative AI stuff, I mean, it can think and reason in a way that certainly replicates or allows you to believe that it is at some level human. And we all need feedback, right? And so, to the ability for us to see ourselves is a uniquely human challenge, as you spoke about with mentors. I mean, I was on the phone for half an hour this morning with my uncle, who I'm not related to. I call him my uncle because he helps me.
Yep.
He gives me counsel and sort of breaks me down like an uncle would do. AI can do that. Right. I mean, I'm working on a really tough leadership issue right now at my company. I got, working on some leadership dynamics and really trying to up level a few folks at my team. Who do I get counsel from that on? Right. I can go to my board. I can go to my investors, but I can actually go to AI and say, how would so-and-so deal with this problem? And it is remarkably good at taking sort of the collective wisdom and giving you prescriptive, not always perfect, but prescriptive counsel on how to approach it, specific examples, references of ways that other people have dealt with it. And so, I mean, look, what the company does is we use that level of intelligence to give you the feedback you wish you could get after every single sort of interaction and conversation, right? We're helping sales teams. You get off a sales call, First thing a sales rep wants to do is ask their manager or their leader, hey, how did I do? What can I think I'm going to get the deal? What should I do next? How can I get better? We can do that with AI. It's not perfect. It's not as good as your sales leader, but guess what? Sales leaders listen to less than 1% of sales calls. They can't be in every room. And now that we're all remote, they're physically not in the room anymore to even listen. So we're taking really interesting data of human to human conversations, and we're looking at them with AI to help people get better. And then we do a unique thing with simulations and practice that I'm also happy to talk about.
So I think that's great, because I remember my career as a young salesperson, right? It would have been great to have that kind of feedback, because I have a thick skin. You can tell me, Tom, you suck at that. And, I might cry like the next person, but the next day I'm going, okay, I'll show you. And I'm out there doing it. So I liked getting the feedback of where I came up short, and it made me a better salesperson. It's made me better probably in everything that I've done. But when you said, hey, you can ask AI with specific examples, because of my speaking background, a gentleman I know who's a consultant had to give a real keynote. He does a lot of speaking to companies and to boards, but he had to speak to like 300 people. And it happened to be an audience of professional speakers. And so there's nobody worse as one. There's nobody worse to speak to, but not as one. It's even worse, because you're like, oh, they're all going to be judging me. So before he went on stage, he told me that he went to ChatGPT and he said, my favorite orator that I've studied through my life was Martin Luther King Jr. And I have to give a speech. How would Martin Luther King Jr. prepare to give a speech? And it came back with answers. It said that he would pray and meditate. He would do this. He would think about, could he serve someone in the audience? And this was all things that he had shared that he did, but it all came right back to him. And he said it was the best thing he'd ever done before he gave the speech, was ask that of AI, and asking it specifically to give him an example as if it was Martin Luther King coaching him. So when you said that, I thought, I just heard this story.
Yeah. It's called using personas. It's one of the 3 most effective ways to work with AI.
Nice. So let's talk, you said you can talk a little bit more about what your product does. Give us a little bit more.
Sure. So at work, right? We're in a sales job, in any sort of customer facing role, so much of the job you're evaluated on your performance, right? I mean, the same way you're talking about public speaking, performance is how well you communicate and pitch your target customers and your prospects. What's fascinating about it is compare that performance to music or sports or all these other things that we do. You know what the biggest difference is? At work, we don't practice. We spend so much time. If you're an athlete, the practice to performance ratio is like 100 to 1. In music, I play the guitar. It's even higher. But at work, we don't practice. We're just expected to be on our game and performing every day. And for these critical stakes things, whether it's an executive public speaking or it's a sales team, pitching a target customer, it is shocking to me that we don't practice. So we have built software. It's a simulation. It's like a flight simulator for sales to allow sales reps to practice. They practice with a target customer. It's an avatar. It looks and talks like their target customer. And then immediately after, the AI comes in and gives them feedback and says, hey, Noah, you did these 3 things wrong. You didn't use the methodology. And at the end, you forgot to close and ask for the next step. And it gives you that feedback that it's going to make you so much better in the moment of actual interaction. And so we help people perform better.
God, I kind of want to have this just for as I'm trying to retool and regrow the Austin Technology Council. I want to practice. I'm liking this. So how big is your company now? How many people do you have? How many customers? Do you have?
We've got 35 folks. It's a B2B SaaS company. It's an AI first business. Got about 25 customers, and some really, really large teams use it. I mean, uniquely, this pain is felt by companies with really large teams because you got a global workforce. You got thousands of people talking to customers. And that's where there's just no way that managers can spend enough time with each person to make them great at performing at their job. And so we can do that with AI.
I could talk to you all day about this, but one of the reasons I brought you on the show, I'm going to shift gears and just tell everybody to go check out Quantified.ai and learn more about it. I'm sure there's all kinds of information on your website. But one of the reasons I brought you on the show is years ago, and I remember when he did this, your dad did a thing he called the Zandan Poll, where, because, Austin, since the early 90s, has been on this crazy growth pattern. And sometime in the early 2000s or 2010, or I'm guessing if I remember correctly, 2011, your dad sort of started saying, wow, look at all these changes, and actually did real research and real polling on what did Austinites really think about how Austin was changing. And then that's been redone several times. And now you've taken this on. So what is the Zandan Poll and where did it really come from?
Yeah. So I got to correct you on one thing. He actually launched it in 1998.
Oh, okay.
I grew up here. I was born in Austin in the 80s. And ever since the day I can remember, this has been a boom town, right? I mean, it has been growing and everybody comes here and they're like, oh, it's growing so fast. And I'm like, it's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, I moved here in 92 and there were in the greater area, there were 700,000 people. And of course, now we're 2.2 million. And we were the 25th largest city in America. And now we're the 9th. That's a lot of growth in 32 years.
It is a ton of growth. And look, you go around and you ask your friends, the people you hang out with, how is it, right? How's it growing? You ask your neighbors, and they all have an opinion and a perspective. And what my dad was really inspired to do was sort of bring the voice of the community, sort of understand from a representative perspective. My father's got a valuation research PhD. So what he is really, really good at, like his gift, is taking an understanding of a population and understanding their perspective in a more holistic, representative way. And so he was really inspired to do that because he was watching all this growth happen in the city saying, how do we build a better city? And how do we sort of know how do we know what the representative problems are instead of maybe our own selfish perspective?
Right. No, I was earlier than I thought, but I remember when this all started. And one of my favorite jokes that I say is if you ask anyone in Austin, when was the best time in Austin? It's the week they arrived.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And we see that in the data. And so, every 3 or 4 years, he's done the poll. He's refreshed it. He's looked at trends. And he no longer lives in Austin. Cedar fever got to him. So I have inherited the poll. And my qualification is my last name, but also my love for Austin and how much I care about the community and building a great city.
Nice. So let's talk about some of this data, right? Because this is stuff we talk a lot about at the Austin Technology Council, and I'm always having conversations with people about where are we? For those who listen to this podcast regularly, one of the last questions is always, where are we now and where are we going? What have we done right? What are we not doing so right? So let's talk about the data. First of all, one of the things that I saw is that in the last several years, that really hasn't changed that much, right? I mean, I don't know what it is going back farther, but in the last few years, our views of Austin have kind of surprisingly stayed the same. Yes?
Yeah, you ask a representative sample of Austinites, is this city going in the right direction or not? And 40% of Austinites feel we're heading in the right direction. So first and foremost, 60% of people think we are not heading in any direction or all heading in the wrong direction. But 40% of people feel like we are heading in the right direction. Good news is if you do that poll nationally, about 20% of people think our country's heading in the right direction. So we're outperforming the nation. But yeah, I was really surprised. The last time we did this poll was January of 2020. And so right before COVID, we did the poll. And, 4 years later, like heat, ice, COVID, all this change, all these people moving here, I thought it would be a lot worse. And it was pretty interesting to see that right direction, wrong direction was basically flat over the last 2 runs of the poll.
That's interesting because I would have thought it would have changed, certainly for the worse a little bit just because we added so many people in those 4 years. So,
yep.
So that's fascinating. So what are some of the differences in attitude that you see based on, you said, it is based on when you got here. What do you see the differences in how long people have lived here or their age or their gender, et cetera? What are some of the differences that breaks down in the polling?
Yeah. So people who are new to Austin love it. The happiest people here are brand new to Austin and they tend to be younger. The longer you're here, the more frustrated you are. And, that doesn't really surprise me that much. I think that, if you've been here and you're trying to protect the growth and you see all these people coming in, you're like, this isn't the reason I moved here, right? I came to a small town and now it's all of a sudden, as you said, the 9th biggest city in the world. Happiest generation is millennials, followed by Gen Z. So younger folks, a lot happier than some of the older generations.
Well, part of it is if you're in those generations, Austin is still kind of a big party, right? I mean,
it's a big party. You've got jobs here. You've got, beautiful stuff to do outside. It's still a pretty livable city compared to your other options, which are, some of these bigger coastal cities. And, it compared to your options, it is a great city.
Well, one of the things that struck me, and I don't know the exact numbers, but they're pretty damn close. We've tripled in size. But when I moved here, the average age of an Austinite was somewhere around 30. and the average age of an Austinite is still somewhere around 30. It's amazing that we have tripled in size and everybody's aged. I am shockingly 32 years older than when I got here, but everybody else doesn't seem to have aged. So how does that young, all the young people coming here and stuff like that, how does that really factor into sort of some of the opinions about where we're headed and where we're going? Do you see that?
We do. I mean, look, so first, young people are really happy here. The number one reason people move to Austin is because of a job. It's interesting that did not used to be the case. 30 years ago, people did not come here because of jobs. There weren't that many jobs here.
I did, but you're right. There wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't a town. I mean, even when I got here, it was a university town and it was a government town, and there was a few other jobs, but that was really sort of the focus. So yeah, I get that.
No, when I was in New York, a headhunter comes to meet with me and says, "Hey, you spent a few years on Wall Street. Do you want to go take a job at an investment firm?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to go work in Austin." They're like, "We don't have any relationships in Austin," right? So it was the reality was back then that wasn't an option. So one of the most interesting things about the poll is like Austin is obviously a hyped city, right? I mean, it is number one place to go get a job, number one place to live, right? You get all these great rankings. Truth is, we could probably overhyped it. And that comes out in a lot of our data. 64% of people think that Austin actually lives up to the hype. The rest don't. And, there's challenges here like there are in any city. I think that hopefully we can build the infrastructure and the support and efforts like what you're doing to make this city a more welcoming place for people that come here. But I think we have some work to do there to sort of make it, to help it live up to the hype and the reason that all these young folks are moving here.
Well, it's good that it's 64% believe it's that good. I mean, it's better than being the other way around, right? Because then you're totally overhyped. If 64 think it sucks, or is underwater, that's a problem. The line I've used for 30 plus years is that if people come and get engaged in the community, and I've known a few people who've moved here who hated Austin and they moved away. We had a neighbor, we loved her, they had kids the same age. She just couldn't do it. She was like, she had to get back to Houston, so her friends were, but she also never engaged. She didn't make friends. She didn't, do things otherwise in the community. But I always say that if people come here and they find their place, right? They find their people. I always say Austinites have an unnatural love affair with Austin. It's hard to pull someone out of Austin, who really has that. And one of the things I saw in the poll is that it came out very clearly and said that the more engaged you are with the city and the community, the more positive you are about Austin. But some of the just observational stuff I'm seeing is people are in across the country are getting less engaged. We see it in membership in things like the Austin Technology Council. We see it in people joining social clubs. We see it in people joining churches. So people in general are getting less engaged in community activities. And yet your survey says the more engaged you are, the more positive you're going to be about where you live. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, this was the biggest thing for me in the poll. If you live here and you are engaged with the community in some form, you are 46% more likely to think that Austin is going in the right direction. So if you do something with the community, I mean, I'm an example of this. I moved to New York. I worked all the time. I literally slept under my desk. I did nothing in New York. I moved to LA. Had a really challenging investment job. I did nothing in LA. And so I was like sort of, spent these stints in these cities and was never really like onboarded into the city or the community. And I think that if what we're seeing in the data is if people are engaged with the community, they're much happier here. And so part of our work as city leaders and as folks that care about our city is to help new people get onboarded into the community, help them get engaged, give them help them find their tribe and their activities and their culture in a way where they feel connected. And they're really going to then give that investment back into the city, both in their own happiness, as well as obviously through their commitment of their time or other methods to make the city better.
Well, and I talk to a lot of, young growth-oriented entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to, expand and, reshape the board of the Austin Technology Council. And I talk to people about getting involved. And a lot of the CEOs, they already have something, or they're trying to grow a company. They've got 30 employees. They're like, and what I'll say is who on your senior team could benefit from board experience and could benefit from being involved in something? And it sort of shifts their thought. They're like, oh, wait a minute, my CFO, could you have my CFO or my CTO? They would benefit from finding a place to engage. And so, I'm a really big believer that a lot of this, of getting people engaged, goes back to the leadership in the companies by, number one, setting the example by being engaged themselves, and then encouraging the people on their team to find their own areas of engagement.
But what you're doing is really smart. You're giving people a logical and easy and approachable way to get engaged, right? It's not, okay, go engage to the community. You just need to go be a volunteer, Noah, and go volunteer once a week, right? You're saying, hey, is there someone on your team that wants board experience and that wants to be involved and support technology in the city? Yeah, it's my CTO. Okay, great. We'll help them get involved. And so if we build a friendly on-ramp and we actually think about, okay, one of the solutions to making Austin a better place is thinking about all these intelligent ways to onboard people into the community, then we're actually helping ourselves. And I really like your example there.
So here's the thing, right? There's lots of good things. We can talk about the good all day long. Everybody wants to talk about the good. What are some things in the poll you found? What are the biggest problems that we face?
So we face a lot of problems. The gripes about Austin, they're not that surprising. Top three things that people wish Austin would be better at. Number one is traffic. Number two is homelessness. And number three is cost of living. Those are the three biggest things that people say, like those are the biggest problems in Austin. The number one trend that we saw change from the last few versions of the poll is the homelessness. That's really come on strong. I mean, if you think about sort of where we were in 2017, 2014 versus where we are now, that's a really tough problem facing this city and something that people are really struggling with.
Sure. And I mean, it's gotten to be a serious issue here, but we also have examples of where not dealing with it. I think when we look at San Francisco and we look at Los Angeles, and we see the problems that they have, it's like we're tracking that way. So what can we do about these problems? What can we do about traffic? What can we do about housing prices? Because more people are coming. Housing prices are supply and demand. I don't think housing prices are going to go backwards. They've retreated a little from, the crazy boom of 2022. And the national media wants to say, oh, Austin's falling apart. They had a 10% fall off in housing prices. Yet we had a 20% rise over the last 4 years. And, I was pointing out that, my house is still 10% higher than it was in 2019, even though it lost 10% last year. It's like, we're still doing pretty well if you've gone up 10% in 4 years, but I don't think our housing prices are going to get cheaper. So how do we deal with traffic, housing, and homelessness?
So I'm not going to take on traffic here. That's too big of a problem, and one that I've been living with in this city for a long time because we've always just outgrown all of our infrastructure.
I grew up in Los Angeles, so traffic is just a thing.
Yeah. So let's just we'll chalk traffic up to at least we're not DC or LA. The interesting thing we saw in this survey is that we asked people their stance on economic growth, housing development, and neighborhoods, and 77% of people in Austin are okay with more density if it helps with housing prices. So people are okay with more density here. Like there's this sort of NIMBY West Austin thing of like, I don't want an ADU or a garage apartment, but like the majority of Austin residents, in this poll, we were very careful to make it representative of the census of Austin, are okay with more housing development if it makes pricing more affordable. And so I look at the article about, Austin's rent went down 7%, how horrible the city, overgrew. No, I look at that as a good thing. We're building more housing. People want to live here. We're building more. It's okay if it's density. And like, that's a positive thing that I think gives us some hope around that housing price issue.
Nice. So what do you think we can do about homelessness?
That's a tough one too. I mean, on a personal level, like I really respect the work that I see at Community First. I think there's some entrepreneurs doing some really cool stuff. It's a really tough issue. Part of it is housing affordability. Like, obviously if it's unaffordable, it's a really tough issue. But I'm hoping that that's something like what the folks at Community First are doing to build safe communities and an effective on-ramp for those folks can start to help with those issues. But it's a really hard one.
So we've covered most of the things that were in the poll. What have I missed that is the one thing you wish everybody saw when they look at the poll and they read I didn't read the intense one. I read the summary. What is the one thing that you say, no, you missed this, Tom? How could you not have brought up this about the poll?
Well, look, Tom, we asked a lot of questions about technology. So given your audience and your organization and association, let me give you a few stats that we did find. 62% of people believe that innovation is important to Austin. Only 4% believe it's not important. It's actually down from previous polls. So in the previous polls, it was like mid to high 70s thought that innovation is important. So innovation is really important, but it's a little bit less important than it was in the past. And maybe that reflects, manufacturing coming into the city so strong, like someone like Tesla or Samsung. 60% say our innovation culture is better than average compared to other cities.
I agree. I would side with that for sure.
Yeah. Now, only 10% say it's world class. So we're not world class, but we're better than average. And that probably pretty well defines the feel in Austin. Now, I can't help myself. I run an AI company, so I asked a few questions about AI as well. This is pretty interesting. 11% of residents believe AI is a blessing. 15% consider it a curse. And about 57% say it's both a blessing and a curse.
I'm gonna fall into the 57%. I think it's a blessing and a curse. However, my caveat is I think people are scared of it. And the way we get over being scared of something is you go do it, right? I used to be scared of heights. So the first thing I did when I decided I wasn't gonna be scared of heights anymore is I jumped off the Stratosphere Hotel's tower in Las Vegas, which is a 108-story outdoor leap. I mean, you're tethered. And I did Google it on the cab ride over. No one has ever died jumping off somebody broke a few people broke ankles, but nobody ever died doing the sky jump. But after I'd done that, I then went ziplining. And then, I did a small cliff jump and, I've gone back, I've jumped off the Stratosphere Hotel again. And by doing it, I'm no longer I still don't love heights, but I'm not petrified of heights. And that's my example to everybody with this AI is, the people who are scared of it or the people who think it's a curse. Are you using it? Are you asking it questions? Are you having it, rewrite something for you and see what it does?
Sounds like the same people who are grumpy about Austin. You kind of have to ask them, are you doing anything about the community? Are you interacting with others? And, it's the same thing, right? It's the human condition.
So any other tech pieces?
Yeah, let me give you two more. Number one thing that residents prefer that we do to make innovation better here is that we focus on training. Training people for jobs. That there was a strong preference for that over giving incentives to business. And so pretty interesting to see that stat come through pretty heavily. Finally, I was curious, and this is a new thing we've never asked before because it's now relevant post-COVID, is how many people are working from home versus hybrid versus in office. And so in Austin, about 20% of residents work from home. Again, this is not in tech, this is universally. About 20% of residents work from home, 17% are hybrid, and 32% are fully in office. So you asked me earlier.
That doesn't add up to 100%.
The rest gave me an other. So maybe they're not working or they're studying or they're in school, right? The survey was 18 plus. So there's some that are not going to be able to answer that question. But you asked me earlier about traffic. One of the things you can do about traffic is if people don't have to be on the road at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. anymore, that's one of the best solutions that we can create for ourselves.
Well, that's all of this has been fascinating. Of course, I have this unnatural love affair with Austin after my 32 years here. And so, I really liked what I saw in the poll. When I read the results of the poll, I reached out to you and said, you have to come on the podcast because it made me feel right. I mean, it made me feel like Austin's okay. Where do you think, aside from the poll, put your Noah hat back on, where do you think we are and where do you think we're going let's focus on it as a tech community?
Yeah, it's a great question. Where are we? I mean, we are a great city for technology. I mean, I was from here, so I was probably a little biased, but I was graduating from school in Kellogg in Chicago, and I wanted to start a tech company. And I really looked at three cities, Tom. I looked at San Francisco, I looked at Denver, Boulder, and I looked at Austin. I moved to Austin because of the community and the mentorship that I knew I could get here relative to those two other cities. But, Austin is a top 5 city for innovation in the U.S. And I think that's where we are. Where are we going? I'm not a fortune teller. I sort of lean on I leaned on the data intentionally to maybe, not provide too much fortune telling or projections. But I think we're in a good position. I think we've gained a lot of talent over the last 5 years. And I think some of that talent is really going to be fundamental to innovation. I have friends here that have moved here to start venture funds or friends that have moved here to start really impressive technology companies. And, I think that's really exciting, and that's going to create more community and just a halo of talent and innovation here. But, the city is not without its risks. And, one of the things we found in this poll is if you ask people, what are the cities that Austin is most similar to? The number one city on that list was Portland. And that brings up a lot of fear. If I go talk to city leaders about, hey, the number one city that people here feel like we're similar to is Portland. There's a lot of things going on in Portland that I think we wouldn't want to recreate. And, a lot of people would also say there's a lot of things in San Francisco we don't want to recreate. And so we're in control of our destiny, but we have to be conscious of some of the directions and the patterns we're creating for ourselves.
Do you think we isolate ourselves a little bit? Do you think we live a little bit in an Austin bubble as a tech community?
Probably. I mean, the world's more connected than ever before, right? I mean, as someone that runs a tech company that's remote first and distributed, I got folks everywhere, and we're not just Austin. But I do think we have this halo of a growing city, and I think we have this halo of a very business friendly state that's benefited from a lot of energy. And so, there's probably a little bit of naivety in our approach to growth.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is in this job, I've gotten really involved with a group called the Technology Councils of North America. And there's actually, people are surprised to hear this, there's 100 independent technology councils in the US and Canada. Oh, wow. And 66 of them belong to this association of associations. And I spend a lot of time, I've made really good friends. I've been mentored by some CEOs who've been running tech councils, in some cases for 20 plus years, who've helped me kind of get my hands around how to rebuild and reshape where we go with ATC. And when I talk to some other people in the community and I talk about cities that have, 600, we have a couple hundred members who support ATC. Nashville has 500, Pittsburgh has 1,000, Washington State has more than that. Phoenix has 800. I mean, I'm guessing on the numbers, but, and they have staffs of 15, 8, 10, 15 people. And what their tech communities are doing is really fascinating. The jobs they're bringing there, what's happening with their innovation. And sometimes our people are like, really? Pittsburgh? And it's like, yeah, they're doing some really, really interesting things. And so sometimes I wonder, if everyone's a tech hub, are we a tech hub? What does that mean? And so I sort of use the word that, we have to be an innovation hub, because I think that's what makes us stand out and continue to grow. But I sometimes think we have blinders on and we just think Austin's so cool.
And it is cool, right? But, I think that the only way we're going to keep it cool and keep it growing and keep it attractive is with some intentional push, like what you're doing, right? I mean, we have some natural strengths that have gotten us to where we are today, but some intentional energy and focus, I think, is going to really help us hit that next chapter.
And you set me up for this. Is I say that the Austin Technology Council, our job is to celebrate the past, be present in the now, and look to the future. And that's why we're starting the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, which, probably is 20 years late getting started. It's going to take me 6 years to get it filled with the people who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame from 20 and 30 years ago. But we're launching it with exactly that thing, is we want to celebrate that past. We want to be present now, but we want to look to the future as no,
I love it. I saw that the last guy who won the award was Bill Wood, who's wonderful.
Yeah.
And let's go find all those other Bill Woods and celebrate them.
That's exactly right. And I think there's probably 40-ish people who should have been put into a Hall of Fame. And so that's what, you can't drop them all at one cocktail party. So we're going to do it over 6 years. And then it'll keep going, because we'll have new Bill Woods and we'll have new, people who are innovating and driving the city and the tech community forward. So before I let you go, I always ask people this. My personal motto, it's what I speak about when I give keynotes, is that community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. If we had more of that, I think we all win. Which one of those words resonates the most with you?
Well, I've spent a lot of time building companies that are focused on conversations. So, my work life is actually really dedicated to helping people have better conversations. I believe that better conversations create more human understanding, connection, and equity. And so I'm very invested professionally in that. But, Tom, I live here. I'm from here. I've got young kids that are in schools here. And a lot of my recent focus, sort of extracurricularly outside of my work, has been on community. Just a big believer that community defines our happiness, and creating great community for ourselves and around us. It's brought me a lot of happiness recently in my life. And I think it just has a remarkable impact on the way that someone approaches your life and your satisfaction in your relationships.
So no, last question. Somebody who you went to Dartmouth with, who has never come to visit from Austin, somebody who was on the swim team with you, or they were in your fraternity, they reach out, you reconnect, they go, I'm coming to Austin for a conference. Let's go out. Where would you take them? Where's the one place, either like an attraction or a restaurant or something where you'd be like, this is Austin?
Oh, I've got young kids and they were COVID babies. And so like my knowledge of the social scene here is, I was thinking about this the other day. It's terrible. But one of the interesting things you actually ask people in this poll, what is the Austin culture? Number one thing they say is there was a tie actually between music and food.
There you go.
And so, if I have my dream, I'm taking them to watch like an ACL taping, right? I'm giving them some music and maybe a great meal, like one of those special Austin places, barbecue, Mexican food. I got some favorites there that are pretty logical. Maybe some place that's been around for a while and not, one of the new ones.
Maybe a place in Driftwood. I always take people to the Salt Lick, and some people go, "Oh, there's better barbecue," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's still the Salt Lick."
It's a special trip, right? It's a special place. I mean, one of my favorite Mexican places is Fonda San Miguel. I mean, it's been around forever. And there's
I haven't been there. I don't even think I've thought about it in a decade. I got to go back.
They just they got a new. Unfortunately, he passed away, but. They got new owners, new chefs. They're doing fantastic.
Nice.
And talk about it like a special Austin place. It's a little bit off the radar. But that's what I'm doing. A little bit of Mexican food, barbecue, and music.
Well, Noah, thank you so much for being a guest on Austin Tech Connect. Any last words?
I appreciate what you guys are doing. Building the community for technology. It's something I'm personally invested in and excited to support.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being here on the show. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. We do this show for you. If people aren't listening, why are we interviewing these cool people like Noah? So do me a favor. Tell everybody in your company about Austin Tech Connect. Make sure that you're listening it when you go out for a run, when you're at the gym, when you're driving, because that's where everybody tells me they listen, or those three things. When someone tells me I listen every week, I go, where do you listen? They listen in their car, they listen at the gym, or they listen running around the lake. So make sure you tell everybody, and ask this question if you work for a tech company. Is your company a member of the Austin Technology Council? And if not, or if nobody knows, why not? Now is a great time. We're doing some new things. We have a lot of new things on the thing. So I encourage all of you to make sure that your company's voice is being part of what our tech community is doing as we look to the future. So go out and join the Austin Technology Council today.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.